Friedrich Nietzsche didn't speak in riddles. He spoke in fire. And when he spoke of women, it was not out of hatred, but of raw, brutal clarity. He saw what most men still refuse to see, that some women don't just take your time, your energy, or your attention, they take your will to power, that inner flame that drives a man to become, to dominate, to create. He warned that behind certain smiles lies something darker, not affection, but absorption, not union, but consumption. And most men? They walk right into it. Smiling, grateful, blind. Nietzsche didn't say all women were dangerous. He said that some women carry within them the very thing that terrifies weak men the most, a challenge to their own sovereignty, not because they dominate through strength, but because they seduce through vulnerability. They reflect your desire, your weakness, your addiction to being needed. And in that moment, you stop being a creator. You become a puppet. You think she completes you. But Nietzsche knew, he who cannot command himself should obey. And if your soul trembles at her gaze, you are no longer a man. You are a mirror waiting to be broken. Nietzsche believed that most men walk through life like sleepwalkers, unaware of the forces that shape them, weaken them, drain them. And the most seductive of these forces is the woman who flatters your ego while feeding on your drive. She won't raise her voice. She won't command you directly. She'll simply make you feel seen, and in doing so you'll give her everything. Your discipline, your ambition, your solitude, your edge. Slowly, your power begins to rot, not because she's evil, but because you never learned to govern your hunger. You called it love. Nietzsche called it surrender. What Nietzsche feared wasn't women, it was the man who doesn't know who he is without one. He saw that beneath every collapsing man was a deeper truth. He was never strong to begin with. His strength was borrowed, from attention, from validation, from desire. And when that woman left or turned cold or stopped admiring him, he shattered, because he built his identity around being admired, not around being powerful. Nietzsche warned, the best friend is likely to acquire the best wife, because a good marriage is based on talent for friendship. But most men don't want friendship. They want worship. And that need is the rope that strangles their will. Nietzsche understood the danger of a man who chases comfort, because comfort softens you. And some women know exactly how to make you comfortable, too comfortable. She'll soothe your wounds, stroke your ego, tell you you're special, until you forget you're in a war. Until your edge dulls, your ambition fades, your clarity gets wrapped in the scent of her skin. And Nietzsche would whisper, beware the woman who makes you forget your suffering. She might also make you forget your greatness. You weren't meant to be tamed. You were meant to become. And if her presence turns your fire into fog, you've already lost. Some women don't want to build with you. They want to feed on what you've already built. They want the house, the name, the lifestyle, but not the war that forged it. And Nietzsche saw this clearly. He believed that most men are not destroyed by enemies. They are destroyed by their own craving to be understood. You meet her. She listens. She mirrors your pain. You think, finally someone gets me. But what you don't see is that every confession you make, every weakness you reveal, becomes a lever she can pull. And before you know it, you're not building anymore. You're explaining, justifying, pleading, apologizing for your power. And Nietzsche's words echo. Everything that is profound loves the mask. But you took yours off too soon. Nietzsche saw that a man's descent often begins the moment he feels chosen, because most men don't know how to carry that feeling without becoming addicted to it. She chooses him, desires him, praises him, and suddenly he forgets who he was before her. He stops creating from solitude. He stops walking alone. He starts needing her approval to feel worthy. And Nietzsche knew. He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises. But the man who lives through her gaze no longer even knows how to despise. He becomes agreeable, soft, silent. A man whose soul is shrinking and calling it love. That's the kind of woman Nietzsche feared for you. Not the loud one, not the cruel one, but the one who disarms your strength with sweetness. The one who invites you to relax your fire. The one who never asks you to kneel because she knows you'll do it on your own. She doesn't argue, she subtly rewires your rhythm. She doesn't attack, she absorbs. She doesn't need control, she creates dependence. And when that man wakes up years later, he doesn't recognize himself. His hands are soft, his eyes are tired, his voice is hesitant. And Nietzsche would say, "You didn't lose her. You lost yourself in her." And that is a far greater tragedy. Nietzsche believed that the highest goal of man was not to be loved, but to overcome himself. That's why he spoke of the Übermensch, not as a tyrant, but as a creator of new values. A man who stands alone, who shapes the world instead of being shaped by it. But when you tether your worth to her affection, you abandon that path. You no longer act from strength, you react from fear. Fear of loss, fear of disapproval, fear of being alone. You don't lead, you negotiate. You don't decide, you defer. And Nietzsche's voice cuts through the fog. You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist. But you stopped walking your way. You followed hers. He warned that morality, when inherited blindly, becomes a leash. And many men inherit their morality from women. Be nice, be gentle, be safe, don't offend. You follow rules that don't belong to you. You live by codes that never came from your fire. And then you wonder why you feel hollow. Nietzsche would tell you, the man who cannot bear to be disliked will never be free. He will always betray himself to maintain harmony. He will always soften his edge to stay desirable. And the woman who recognizes that weakness, whether she means to or not, will drain him. Because she has no choice. Nature consumes the unguarded. It is not personal. It is law. Nietzsche despised herd thinking. And what is modern romance if not a herd of men trained to seek approval and avoid truth? You post quotes about love. You tell her what she wants to hear. You mute your instinct, dull your edge, dim your light, just to be chosen. And then you wonder why she loses interest. Nietzsche understood. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. When you mold yourself to her expectations, you don't become more lovable. You become predictable, replaceable, drained. Some women don't want a man. They want a mirror. They want a reflection of their own emotional chaos, dressed in loyalty. And most men provide it, because they think suffering proves devotion. Nietzsche would laugh. He'd say, "You are not noble for enduring her storms. You are just too weak to leave the sea." Real power is not staying. Real power is choosing when to walk away without flinching. But the man who clings, who waits, who begs, he is not in love. He is in submission. And no woman truly respects what she can rule with silence alone. Nietzsche saw how easily men collapse when their identity is built on being needed. He knew that many men don't want a partner. They want a purpose assigned by a woman. They ask, "What does she want from me?" Instead of asking, "What do I demand from myself?" And once she becomes the mission, you stop evolving. Your mind orbits her mood. Your strength bows to her absence. Your days are spent deciphering signs, not building empires. And Nietzsche would say, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But your why is borrowed. Fragile, feminized. So when she withdraws, your whole structure collapses like a house of sand. The truth is, some women aren't looking to destroy you. They're just waiting to see if you'll destroy yourself for them. It's not calculated. It's instinct. She tests to see if your backbone is real or borrowed, if your convictions bend when she pouts, if your discipline dies when she gets distant, and when you fold, she doesn't celebrate. She loses trust. Because deep down, even she knows, a man who cannot say no to her will never be able to protect her from the world. Nietzsche didn't say to hate women. He said to become the kind of man who doesn't need to be chosen. One who chooses himself. Every time. Nietzsche believed in the power of solitude, not as isolation, but as a crucible. A place where the real man is forged. He wrote, "The great man is great by virtue of the free play of his strengths. But there is no free play when your strength is tangled in her approval. You may lift weights, make money, read philosophy, but if your center still trembles at her silence, you are not free. You are distracted. And that distraction doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like love. That's what makes it lethal. It looks noble. It feels deep. But it's just a mask over dependency, a romanticized surrender. Some women don't drain your power with force. They drain it with softness, with intimacy, with the illusion that you're finally safe. And Nietzsche would call that safety a spiritual poison, because safety makes most men forget why they were dangerous to begin with. You stop sharpening your edge. You stop walking alone. You stop asking uncomfortable questions. And she sees it. Slowly, your intensity fades, your presence dulls, and she begins to drift. Not because she's cruel, but because you stopped being the man she was magnetized to in the first place. The man who didn't need her comfort, because he was on fire with his own mission. Nietzsche knew the enemy was never out there. It was always within, in the man who compromises his truth for affection, in the man who trades his vision for validation, in the man who molds himself into the image she finds acceptable. And he warned, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, he does not become a monster. But most men become something worse. They become invisible to themselves. They dim their fire to keep the peace. They suppress their instincts to avoid being too much. And in doing so, they don't become good. They become forgettable. Nietzsche saw the ultimate tragedy not in being rejected by a woman, but in being reshaped by one. If her silence can make you beg, if her gaze can break your focus, if her affection becomes your oxygen, then what you've built is not love, but dependency wrapped in poetry. And some women know exactly how to keep you there. Not through cruelty, through need, through flattery, through selective warmth. And Nietzsche would say, when you look long into an abyss, the abyss also looks into you. She reflects what you fear to confront, the parts of you still ungoverned, still desperate, still boyish. And until you face that, you'll keep calling your cage a home. Nietzsche never preached restraint for its own sake. He preached transcendence. He believed that a man must destroy the old versions of himself to become something greater. But how can you do that when you're still addicted to her approval? How can you evolve when your emotional stability is tied to someone else's attention span? The woman who drains your power doesn't do it with violence. She does it with subtlety. She offers you relief instead of reflection. She gives you comfort instead of confrontation. And slowly you forget that life was supposed to feel like fire, not sedation. Nietzsche would look you in the eye and ask, have you ever said yes to yourself without needing her to say it first? Because the moment you stop needing to be seen by her, you become visible to yourself. The moment you stop begging to be chosen, you begin to choose. And that shift terrifies some women. Not because they're evil, but because your independence forces them to confront their own emptiness. Nietzsche called this becoming who you are, not through romance, but through rupture. You stop living for applause. You stop explaining your mission. You stop softening your words. And that's when you stop attracting the women who drain you and start drawing in the ones who fear nothing more than a man who doesn't need them to feel complete. Nietzsche's ultimate lesson was never about women. It was about will. The will to stand alone. The will to speak what burns inside. The will to choose solitude over submission. And most men today have traded that will for warmth, for approval, for sex dressed as love. And when it all falls apart, they blame her. But Nietzsche would say, you gave her the rope, and now you cry because she pulled. The woman didn't drain you. You handed her the faucet. You turned the valve. You silenced yourself and called it love. You betrayed yourself and called it loyalty. And now you're empty, and still afraid to admit it. But Nietzsche never left us hopeless. He didn't write for the broken. He wrote for the ones brave enough to rebuild. He believed that pain could become power, that loss could become vision, that solitude could birth greatness. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. So let the chaos stay. Let her absence sting. Let the silence teach. And from it, rise. Not as a man who hates women, but as one who no longer fears them. Because now you know, the ones who drained your power didn't do it alone. You helped them, and now you stop. So what now? You've seen the mirror. You've seen how some women don't destroy you. They simply reveal that you were never as strong as you claimed, that your edge was borrowed, that your discipline was conditional, that your confidence was just noise until she left. Nietzsche would not ask you to regret that. He would ask you to rise from it. Because the man who has suffered and rebuilt, who has watched himself fall under her spell and still chose to get up, that man is dangerous. Not to women, but to weakness itself. And the next time he feels the pull of flattery, the spell of seduction, he will smile, not because he's tempted, but because he's awake. This is Nietzsche's shocking dark truth. Some women are tests, not to destroy you, but to expose whether you're real, whether you walk in truth or illusion, whether you command your soul or let it be led by hunger. And once you pass that test, something inside shifts. You no longer beg. You no longer prove. You no longer need. You become. And in becoming, you attract not comfort, but challenge. Not worship, but respect. And the man who commands respect, first from himself, will never again be drained. Because he no longer seeks to be filled. He overflows.